Hey, good evening, everybody. Can I get everybody's attention? So, is everybody ready to study the man code for the next 6 weeks? Yeah. All right. Does everybody have a book? Raise your hand if you don't have a book. You have no book? Bill, you want to grab him a book? All right. And Noah's coming in. Welcome, Noah. Make sure you sign in over there. You don't have a book? All right, Bill. Can you give Caleb a book up here?
How does that kid not have a book?
Dad, you didn't get son a book? I got mine. So did everybody, well, except for the people that didn't have a book, did everybody else read the first 2 chapters? All right, that's what we're covering tonight. And yay! So I'm still jet lagging from Minnesota. I spent the weekend at a men's retreat for Revive Church, and the entire retreat, 4 messages, was all on Principle 5 of the Man Code: real men demonstrate consideration. And man, we dug deep into that chapter, and this is going to be kind of more of an overview. And so as we go along through the year and into next year, we'll probably be doing deeper dives like we did at the men's retreat in Minnesota. But Pastor Nate from Revive Church, he taught the first message, and he told us that his last name was Miller. And so he said he got his last name because somewhere back in his past, one of his ancestors had the job of grinding oats into like oatmeal or something, you know. So he was a miller. He milled things. And so then when I got up to teach the next lesson, I said, by the way, my last name is King. So, but I did mention that it must be somewhere way back in my past, because I have about as much royal blood as Elizabeth Warren has Native American blood, right? Boo, boo. But I do have a couple of announcements before we bring Pastor John up and he gets ready to teach us on the first 2 chapters. And so the first announcement I would like to make is for the men's breakfast. Woo-wee! It's coming up on July 27th, which is just about a month from now. It's going to be right at the end of our 6-week study. I think it's the Saturday before the end of our 6-week study. But I invited Pastor Ty Kingry from Mexico to come and speak to us about Mexico, I think. But it's gonna be great. Steve De Leon, if you're familiar with him, he's going to be providing the worship, and so it's going to be a great breakfast. I hope you can join us. It starts at 7:30, and as always, if anyone wants to help us cook and prepare, we usually get there around 5:30. So come and join us. And my last announcement is for our men's retreat. It's coming up on September 27th through the 29th. It's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you haven't signed up or if you haven't been to a men's retreat, man, it is a great way to get to know the guys at the church, spend some time together, spend some time up on the mountain just digging into God's Word. Our verses are Colossians 2, 6, and 7, and the title of the retreat is Grounded in Jesus Christ. And if you look at those particular verses, it talks about being grounded in Jesus, being grounded in the faith, being grounded in the Word. And then when you get to chapter 3, it talks about being grounded in heaven. And so there's going to be some great messages. I encourage you guys to sign up. It's $220. If you want to sign up today, you can sign up at the back table where Steve Strandberg is. Steve, raise your hand. Awesome. Awesome. Usually we get about 80 guys, 80 to 90 guys. So far we have about 20 signed up. So we got plenty of room for you guys. So please join us up on the mountain for some great food, some fun and games, and a fantastic word. So with that, I'm going to invite Pastor John up.
There we go. Thank you, Thomas.
Sir.
I got it.
All right, you got it?
I got it. All right. Well, now, I am looking forward to the men's retreat this year. I didn't get to go last year, but I heard that we started a new sport, aquatic archery. How many of you were there for that? You got to do that? Robert got to do that? I love archery. I've never tried to do it like underwater. I heard you guys were trying to get to that point, so I'm looking forward to that. I was up at Alpine a couple weeks ago, did some archery, did some tomahawk throwing. There's disc golf. It's going to be a great time. So if you haven't signed up for that yet, make sure to see Steve back there and do that. We're looking forward to that. It's going to be a great time. But thank you all for being here. Thank you all for wanting to honor Jesus by becoming better men and for participating with us as men in the study of the Man Code. If you've read the beginning of the Man Code, then you've kind of heard the introductory story of this book. Pastor Mark wrote this book kind of out of necessity as he kind of viewed his own life and then was raising me and my brother and my sister in Colorado some 30 years ago. My sister was getting to the age where boys were going to start showing up, and so he wanted my sister to know what kind of a man to look for. And he realized if he didn't help her see that, then she was going to end up suffering a lot of the same things that his family members and others had suffered. And so this book is the product of that, and we're calling our study here the Man Code, How Men Who Follow Jesus Live, because this study is not meant just to give you information. This study is meant to equip you to live a certain way, and that's what the whole point of the Man Code is. People need a code, a structure to live by, an appeal to think through. And in the year 1899, this young man entered West Point Academy. It was his first of 4 years at that institution in New York, and it began a 52-year career in the United States military. In 1962, he retired after fighting in 2 world wars, as well as the Korean War, and gave a farewell speech there to the graduating class of West Point in 1962. And I want you to hear what 3 words were his code, the code that has defined the U.S. military, at least the West Point institution, for much of American history, and what we can learn from that.
In my dreams, I hear again the crash of guns, the rattle of musketry, the strange, mournful mutter of the battlefield. But in the evening of my memory, always I come back to West Point. Always there echoes and re-echoes duty, honor, country.
Duty, honor, and country defined General Douglas MacArthur's 52-year career. More than 63 years in his association with West Point before he gave that final farewell speech. He called it his final roll call there. Those 3 words, duty, honor, country, are the code for the United States military, at least the West Point institution there. And Pastor Mark has mentioned this, and I know some of you are aware, that recently has been removed as the motto of the West Point institution, the academy there. And so the question is, at this point, what defines the West Point Academy? What is the defining code of the American military now? If it's not duty, honor, and country, what is it? And so far, we don't have an answer yet to that. What will replace it? Because men have to have a code to live by. Douglas MacArthur had a code to live by. John Wayne even famously said, a man's got to have a code to live by, a creed to live by, no matter his job. The reality is we all live by something. We all live life through a certain filter. We all view ourselves, we view our work, we view our families, we view everything around us through a certain lens. And either that lens is going to be me, it's going to be some sort of tradition, it's going to be some sort of social construct, or it's going to be Jesus' view. And the whole point of this study is to view ourselves and how we live as men the way Jesus wants us to have. So to have an effective code. Now, an effective code requires two things. And if you read the beginning of the book, you saw this as well. An effective code, whether that be at West Point, or that be in my own life, or that be at a school. How many of us have gone to a high school that had a school motto? You sang a certain song. You went to a college, they gave you a ring and everything. And there was a certain motto, there was a certain mantra. These things are what define us. These are the values that we hold. It has to be transformational. No school I've ever attended said, just stay as you are, right? No military teaches their men that. Just stay as you are. You're physically fit as you are. You're mentally fit as you are. Your skills are right where they need to be. Don't change anything. A code has to be transformational, but for it to be effective and long-lasting, it has to be transferable. And that's what the man code is supposed to be. That's its intention. Not just to be something that helps you, but equips you to transfer to other people and to help raise your children and to teach your daughter and to show your son what a man is and to show people at your work and at your school. This is supposed to be transferable information. So as we go through the study over the next 6 weeks, you don't need to memorize the book. But what I would really encourage you to do is memorize the 12 points that we have here, because if you internalize these, you will use these every single day of your life. You interact with people every single day of your life. Even if it's just your wife, even if it's just your kids, even if it's just going to work, if you're single, you can use these every single day of the week. You can point things out. If you're at work and you see someone talking about his old lady, that man's not honoring his wife. Does a godly man do that? No. No, Caleb says, no, that's the right answer. Thank you, Caleb. No, almost every day I'm talking with my sons and I say, boys, grow up, be a man. My youngest is 6. He's like, Dad, give me a break. My 6-year-old needs to grow up and be a man. Being a man is not about how old you are. It's not about how tall you are, about how fat you are, about how old you are. It's about how you act. And this is one of the places that we see that. If you got your Bible, go there to 1 Corinthians 16. This is one of the places where you need to have your Bible and you need to underline it, you need to circle it, you need to know this, because this is a code. This is one of the places, one of many places in the Bible where God gives us a code to live by, to do these certain things. And it's just 5 really easy bullet points. This is at the end of the book of 1 Corinthians. This was written to a church that had a lot of problems. It was not the ideal church. It's not like the book of Philippians where Paul's just overflowing with joy and thankfulness for this church. This church had a lot of problems. They needed a lot of help. And at the end of the book, kind of right in the middle of like the farewell, goodbyes, he gives them this 5 bullet point man code. And it goes like this: be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong, and let all you do be done in love. 5 things, 5 easy things that are not so easy, are they? How many of us do those things really well? Really live life paying attention, listening, critiquing everything that I'm thinking about and hearing, standing firm. Do I do that perfectly? I certainly don't. Act like men. What does that even mean? Be strong. Well, I can bench press so much. Is that really what he's talking about? Does Paul care how much you can bench press or how much you can squat? No, he doesn't care about that. He's talking about qualities, characters, traits, and let all you do be done in love. Friends, not everything I do is done in love. I don't live up to that. But that is a code. That is the target to aim for. That's what we ought to be, because each one of these is an imperative. It is a command. And the one that we want to highlight for this study is right there: act like men. And what we need to realize is that is a imperative command that was given to a church, not just to males. That particular command was given to a church, which included men, women, and children. God expects us to live like this, to be watchful, thoughtful, sober-minded, resolute, firm, manly, strong, loving people. But for our study over the next 6 weeks, we got to be able to address that question. What does it mean to act like a man? Do I tell my son that? He says, Dad, what does that mean? And what would you say? What does it mean to act like a man? 3 simple English words. But what does it mean to act like a man? Do what's right. Well, that's good. What is right? Let's define that thing. Well, what we have here is one word. It's 3 words in English, but it's one word in the original language that Paul writes here. And it's tough in English because English we don't use language the same way that this particular language does. This is a verb that uses the word andros. Andros is a noun, like saying a man. But we don't use. Paul does this in Romans as well with words like compassion and mercy and hardening. You can't explain it in English without using multiple words. So you got to use words like act like a man. It'd be something like man up if you're trying to smash it into one word. Like act, it's a verb. Act like an andros. Act like a man. Now that is a gendered word. Andros means a man. But to act like a man does not mean you grow a beard. It means you act a certain way. You behave a certain way. You live a certain way. And so the question for us is, what is a man? If we are commanded, imperative, to act like men, what does that mean? What is a man? Someone help me out. What is a man? Shots fired. Good job, Gary. What is a man? I tell my son, be a man. Dad, what's a man? Well, integrity, responsible. There you go. Let me ask you, is this a man? Technically, physically, me. Is this a man? Is this a man? Is this a man? Friends, I would deposit of those pictures, this is the picture of a man. Money does not make you a man. Attention, cameras, pictures don't make you a man. Winning a trophy or a belt doesn't make you a man. How you live, and frankly, how you die, is really the definition of what it is to be a man. What you die for, what you live for, what you sacrifice, who you sacrifice for. And Jesus is, thank you, Gary, the ultimate example of that. And that's why we are doing this study, because we want to live like that guy. The world might look at Jesus and say, what an utter failure. At one point, he has thousands of people coming to hear him preach. Well, that's at the beginning of John chapter 6. By the end of John chapter 6, the attendance was down to 12. Failure, right? In John chapter 12, Jesus has thousands and tens of thousands of people cheering for him as he enters Jerusalem. 5 days later, they're shouting, kill him. Failure, right? Not in God's view, and certainly not in Jesus' view, because Jesus pursued not personal success, not financial success, not career success. He pursued biblical success. He had a godly view of what success was. And if you're taking notes on this, I want you to kind of write this down somehow. This first point right here, a real man pursues biblical success, is like the umbrella thought for the entire book. Really, the man code is 11 points, not 12. But this is like the umbrella thing. If we're going to be real men pursue biblical success. But what is that? What does that look like? That's what the other 11 points are. There are 11 points under this umbrella thought. I want to be biblically successful like Jesus was. Well, what does that look like? Well, it means having focused ambition and assuming responsibility and protecting others and loving your family and loving the church, not abandoning your family, respecting authority, showing consideration and compassion, because that's what Jesus did. That is the definition of success. What is your definition of success? Recently, this clip went viral on the internet. This was some sort of a guys' conference that was done. A bunch of YouTube influencers were on this panel, and the question was asked, how do you define success? And so I want you to hear how one of these individuals defined it.
How do you define success?
My definition of success is across the board. If you're not ripped, if you're not rich, if you ain't rare, if you don't stand out, if you ain't across the board successful, it doesn't mean.
Now, I had to stop the clip right there because the rest of the clip was not an exhibition of godly character, and because I respect you, I'm not going to subject you to it. But did you hear the definition of success? What was it? 3 things: ripped, rich, and rare. Physically successful, financially successful, and socially desirable is the definition of success. This clip went viral because that individual got very upset at someone on the other side of the stage for daring to say, I have a different definition of success. I have a family. And I'm okay not looking and dressing like you because I value my family more. It went explosive and this video went viral. But what is success? What does it look like? Well, in the book, if you have it there, Pastor Mark gives you a number of examples and illustrations. David is the primary example that we find in the chapter. I know not all of us have read it yet, but if you have, you kind of track along with me as we think of David's life, of someone who really came from nothing. He had tremendous physical success, but his biblical success was on a higher level than pretty much anyone in history. No one, despite all of David's faults, despite all of his mistakes, despite of all of his many problems that he had, no one in history was called a man after God's own heart. But that guy right there. At least not the actor, but the guy he represents. Why? As you think through David's life, this guy's a murderer, he's an adulterer, he's killed all kinds of people, and he's singing songs about him killing people. But there was something about him that God recognized and blessed. And just kind of think through David's story with me. So if you're taking notes, kind of run through David's life. We are introduced to David in the book of 1 Samuel. And what's one of the first things that we see about David? David is a nobody from a little town south of the capital. Well, actually, it's north of the capital city because the capital was Hebron at that time. And the king is suffering emotionally and spiritually, King Saul. And who do they call when things get weird? Not the Ghostbusters. They called David, this young man who already at that age, as a young teenager, has success as a musician, but more than that, he has success amongst his people. People know him for being able to care for, to minister to the king in a situation like that. His reputation was really the value. The success was in people recognizing his worth, not in the skills that he necessarily had. And then we see him as a shepherd in Bethlehem. His father gives him a responsibility. When I was growing up, I had a responsibility of digging ditches. We installed irrigation lines in different properties and things. And I hated it. And anytime I could not do that, I would not do that. And Pastor Mark would make me do that because that's what man does. He trains his son. Get over it, son. You're going to go do that. David gets an assignment from his dad to care for the sheep. He's the youngest of a large family of boys. He gets a pretty lowly job, and yet what are we told about David and his mentality and his quality? How well did he do his job? Excellent. His father could trust him. When threats came to attack the sheep, he didn't run. He stayed and he fought, whether it was people or animals. He fights with wild beasts and he kills them. As a young man, he assumed responsibility. He exhibited courage. He acted like a man. And so later, this weird old guy walks up to him one day and pours some stuff on his head and says, "You're going to be king one day, but not today." As I kind of thought through David's life, what did that feel like to him? Like, he's a nobody who takes care of the pets, and then a guy says you're going to be king, but he doesn't give you a date. You ever say, like it's not like, hey, June 5th of 2026, you'll be king. Just, David, you're going to be king someday. Thanks, Uncle Sam. Like, what do I do with that? I don't. Like, do I start wearing different clothes? What do I do? He doesn't give him anything. So David has to live with that for years, and then later his dad gives him an assignment. So he's taking care of the sheep. Dad gives him another assignment. Take food to your brothers. Your brothers are off to war. Take food to your brothers. He does that job. Has a character. He takes responsibility. Shows up there. Then what happens when he shows up there? All the men are cowering behind him because there's an enemy facing them down. All the big boys, all the men, all the boys that got taller are in the back, and the man who's maybe a little bit shorter than them steps forward and says, "I'll fight." That man Goliath is insulting my people, he's insulting my nation, he's insulting my king, he's insulting my God. I will fight. He assumes that responsibility. He has that courage. He exhibits that godly character. He honors the authority. He honors his king. He honors his nation. He honors his family. And he does what few people will do. Maybe we could pencil that in there. What's the definition of a man? Doing what few other people will do. Doing what other people refuse to do or they're afraid to do. David steps up and does that. And that's in 1 Samuel 16. A number of weeks ago, I got to speak to the middle schoolers on 1 Samuel 18, where we see kind of the results of the David and Goliath story. I mean, we all see in the movies and things about David killing Goliath and everything. But chapter 18 tells us what happened. The success that God gives him as David exhibited godly character and assumed responsibility and had that focus, God blesses that. And not only does Saul love him, but then the nation loves him, then the army loves him, then the king's son loves him, and then the king's daughter loves him and marries him. And it's a skyrocketing career. And then it all gets taken away. Because the man who was king at that time acts like a boy and gets jealous, while the boy who's acting like a man serves his king and gets spears thrown at him, like this one back here, multiple times. And not only does he get spears thrown at him, but the king's son, Jonathan, he gets spears thrown at him because he dares to say, David's not your enemy. He exhibits godly character and godly courage, and he gets spears thrown at him. And for years, David, who is supposed to be king, who had this trajectory of career, suddenly ends up living in a cave with a bunch of brigands for a number of years. He ends up living in an enemy city with spit running down his beard and acting like an insane guy just so they don't kill him. And it's in that time period, as he's hiding in the caves of a place that we call En-Gedi. How many of you have been to Israel and been to En-Gedi? A couple of you? Two? It's an amazing place. Like, everyone wants to go to the Dead Sea. I thought En-Gedi was like the cool spot down there around the Dead Sea. It's amazing. Because you can see some of the caves that David hid in. They're still there. And we're told of two occasions where David, this young man, now a full-grown, not quite so young man, is living in this cave. He has the promise of God that he'll be king, and twice God gives him King Saul. If you know those stories, you remember how twice David does not kill King Saul. Do you remember why, though? He says, I will not strike the Lord's anointed one. God has put Saul in that place. God has promised me something, but I will not assume that. I will rather assume responsibility for what God has given me now. I will honor the authority that God has placed over me right now. I will not be the one to take Saul's life. And his friends were ticked at him, but God blessed him. Would you and I have done that? Saul has taken his family. Saul has confiscated his property. Saul has taken his wife away from him. Saul's trying to kill him. God's promised you the kingdom. Just take it, David. But he doesn't. He lives up to the man code and honors the authority that God has placed over him and waits for God's timing to get what God promised him. And God blesses him for it. My favorite story of David in that time period is this one day he's weeping over the fact that his hometown, Bethlehem, has been conquered by an enemy army. And he is sitting there in this cave around with some friends, and he makes this one kind of off statement. I just wish I could get a drink of water from the well in Bethlehem. I don't even know if he meant to say it out loud. It's like a simple comment. But he's got three friends there with him who hear him say that. They sneak out that night and fight a whole enemy garrison to get to the well. They get the water, and they bring it back. And David, when they give it to him, he takes it and he dumps it on the ground. Why? One, he says, because I will not comfort myself at the risk of your lives. Your lives are more important to me than this water. So to symbolize that, he dumps it out. But also because he gives what's called a drink offering there, something that had tangible value to him, personal refreshment, personal comfort. It had sentimental value. It's from his hometown. It's what he asked for. He sacrifices that to God. God, you're more important than my comfort in this situation. My men's lives are more important than my comfort in this situation. So he sacrifices that. And what might have offended the three guys, we're actually told there they loved David for doing that. This is a man who, not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, has an immense level of biblical success because he was always thinking about, how do I please God? There were times he forgot to do that and face the consequences of it. But he is called a man after God's own heart because over and over again, even when he makes a mistake, he comes back. David continually humbles himself and comes back to that place where Paul talks about this to the Corinthians, that whether he's at home or away, it is our desire to be pleasing to Jesus. Now, when Paul says that to the Corinthians, 2 Corinthians chapter 5 there, he's actually talking about being alive or dead. At home with Jesus. I'd rather be home, he talks about in the Philippians as well. I'd rather go home and be with Jesus, whether I'm there with the Lord or whether I'm away from him, which actually means here. Whether I'm alive or dead, at home, alone, or out in public, we make it our aim to please him. That is a biblical definition of success. If I please Jesus with what I did today, I don't care if I made money. That's how a man thinks. That's how we talk as a staff here at 412 Church. We can do all kinds of things on Sunday morning, but if Jesus isn't happy with it at the end of the day, it was all a failure. People may be upset at it, but if Jesus is happy with it, it's okay. That's our aim, to please him. That's what men do. Men are constantly thinking about what pleases Jesus. And so even if they have to go show up at places when they could be sleeping, they could be sleeping in on Sunday morning. If they show up and they have smiles and they have joy, that's how men act. Men put themselves in difficult situations. They get up and speak when it's not really a thing that's all that comfortable to them, but the opportunity to speak truth is more important. Speak for Jesus is more important. Men uplift others when people are hurting. That's what men do. Men do that whether they're up on stage or they're in the back holding boxes or they're holding doors open for other people or typing on a computer screen. That's how men live for Jesus. If you're typing away on a computer screen for yourself, what value is there after you buy the hamburger and waste the money that you made to get that? But if it's for Jesus, it has long-lasting value. And that's how men think. And so David had that way of thinking. And so he's that example for us of biblical success. And I think the greatest compliment paid to David, other than he was a man after God's own heart, can be found in Acts chapter 13, where Paul says that David, after he had served the purpose of God in his own generation, passed away. We could probably fill that in as a definition of success. How high did I push Jesus and how quickly do I fade away? The higher that Jesus is exalted and the quicker that I'm out of the way, the better, the more successful I am. Not only did David understand this, not only did Paul understand this, but my favorite guy in the New Testament, other than Jesus, of course, is Jesus' favorite guy. His name was John. And in John, different John, the Gospel of John, chapter 3, John the Apostle records the words of John the Baptist when his ministry wasn't going so well. At the beginning of the book of John, John's ministry is like exploding and people are coming to him, people want to hear about him, they're getting baptized and all kinds of stuff. But then in chapter 3, his friends are very upset because people are leaving John and going to see Jesus. Our attendance is down, our giving is down, our influence is down, our online presence is down. John says, great. My joy is complete. For Jesus must increase and I must decrease. The sooner I'm out of the way and the sooner I can lift him up, the more successful I've been. That's how men think. And that's really how we need to think as men as we go through this study, as we think on these different points. The more I can uplift Jesus and honor him and please him, the more successful I really am. That's what biblical success looks like. Now, that's kind of, again, the umbrella thought for this study. The first of the 11 action points is that next chapter. Chapter 2, we're going to look at together real quick here, is this: focused ambition. If we are going to have biblical success, we have to have focused ambition. All of us who have been on sports teams, all of us who have a job, all of us who have been married know that if you're going to have success in any of those things, you have to have a focused ambition. How many of us are married? How many of us had to work hard at that? How many of us didn't? Didn't have to work hard to get married? Anyone? Okay, I was just wondering. I always wanted to meet the guy. You're like, yeah, it was easy. It takes work. It takes resources. You lose sleep, right? You sacrifice for that because she's worth it. Well, if Jesus is really worth it, then it's going to require focused ambition. My question for us is this actually what we want? Do we actually want to be men who are biblically successful and who really live for Jesus? That's going to require focused ambition. Anyone know Jocko? Navy SEAL, big time on YouTube. This is what he has to say about focused ambition. Ooh, we there?
Do you actually want to do this or not? Your excuses will take everything that you ever wanted from you. Go try and accomplish something that's hard. You may win, you may lose, I'll tell you what, you'll be better, and then you're going to win.
If you haven't seen his stuff on YouTube, he's got a lot of very wise things, including, I was sharing with our middle school guys at one point, his video on what to do if someone wants to fight you. Now, this guy's killed people, and his main advice is run away. I don't want to fight people because bad things can happen. Very few good things can happen if I fight you, even if I win. But anyway, great advice from this guy right here. But his first question here, do we actually want what this study is about? Do we actually want to be godly men? I don't know why you're here. In a group this size, I'm not naive. In a group like this, there are people who probably didn't really want to be here. You know, your wife kind of guilted you into it. Your girlfriend said, you should probably do that. Grandma paid you to be here. I don't know what the case was. It happens. But do you really want it or not? Or is it just kind of, well, I thought this would be interesting. I'm kind of curious about this. I heard there might be food. Where's the food at, Thomas? This is a man thing. We got to have bacon somewhere. Do we actually want it or not? If we do, then it requires focused ambition. If we're going to pursue Jesus, we have to have that focused ambition. If you're going to be a great marksman, I'm going to steal it from you, Jose. Aim small, miss small, right? If you're going to hit a target, you don't aim at the target. You aim at the center of it. You pick one spot, the smallest target possible, and you aim at it. If you're shooting basketball hoops, or shooting basketball at a hoop, there's a certain way you do it, and there's a certain way you don't do it. We all heard about the 10,000 hour rule, right? It's in the book. The study was done. If you practice something for 10,000 hours, you tend to become an expert at it. Except if you practice the wrong things, right? If I try to, shoot a jump shot like this, I might make a few like that, right? My guys right there, they know. You might make a few, but you're not going to become a great shooter. You're not going to become the next Steph Curry practicing that. You have to practice it right. It requires focus and ambition. And someone in the Bible who exemplifies this tremendously is a guy named Nehemiah. Again, this is in chapter 2 there. And Nehemiah has always just amazed me as an individual because he really had everything that you would want. At the beginning of the book of Nehemiah, he's sometimes we view him as a butler. He's the cupbearer to the king of Persia. And sometimes we kind of think of cupbearers like a butler, like he's a servant. He's not. He's one of the most important people in the king's life. The king looks him in the face every day and says, "We good?" Because if we're not good, I'm not eating that. You got to be good with the king. You got to be able to talk to the king. You got to have access to the king. And whatever the king's eating is what I get to eat first. That's a pretty good deal, right? That's a pretty comfortable life. I get all the best food. I get to be in the indoors with the AC. And I get to talk to the king whenever I want. And me and the king got to be on good terms. He's got an easy life, but at the beginning of the book of Nehemiah, some friends show up and they tell him about a place that, as far as we know, he'd never been. His ancestral home of Jerusalem. The city was destroyed about 100-ish years before by the Babylonians. The walls were torn down, the temple was destroyed, and they've tried to rebuild it through the years, and it's never really worked out. And his friends come back and they tell him, our homeland is not only still destroyed, but we are a joke. And people are laughing not only at our families, at our nation, they are laughing at God. They are mocking God, saying, oh, their God couldn't protect them. The gods of the other nations must be more powerful than their God. They're insulting God. And so this burdens Nehemiah to the point that if you got your Bible, look there in Nehemiah chapter 1. It so burdens him that he is driven to prayer. And this prayer is recorded by Nehemiah. And it's a great study to go through his prayer there in chapter 1. But it so impacts him that King Artaxerxes can see the concern on his face in chapter 2, and the king actually asks him what's wrong. And it says there in verse 2, I was very afraid. Because he might have access to the king, but you don't act down in front of the king. King's got better things to do than worry about your attitude. He says, I was very afraid. He tells the king what the problem was, and amazingly, the king says, what do you want to do about it? And Nehemiah, because this was a burden on his heart, because he has a focused ambition on being biblically successful, to honor God, he's thought about what he might need to do. I don't know if he was thinking about quitting and making a fundraiser or what, but he's got a plan. So when the king asks him, what do you want to do? There in chapter 2, he tells him everything I'm going to do. I need to have this much time off. I need these resources. I need letters to these people to get these things from them. I need safe passage through these territories. And what do you think? And the king says, do it. Nehemiah had a focused ambition. But if you notice there, in chapter 2, this is verse 4, then the king said to me, what are you requesting? I love what Nehemiah says here. So I prayed to the God of heaven. That was a very short prayer. Chapter 1's got a big long prayer. This was not a long prayer. This was, I'm assuming, 3 words. God, help me. Because if the king's not happy with my answer here, this could be my career, it could be my life, I don't know. But he relies on God, makes the request, and goes. And when he goes to Jerusalem, he shows up there and very quickly accomplishes something. In 52 days, he accomplishes what no one had been able to accomplish in 100 years and rebuilds the entire wall around the city of Old Jerusalem. In 52 days. That is impossible. But why was it possible? Well, obviously, God was blessing him, but because God had equipped this man with a focused ambition. And when he shows up there were people that were not happy about it, a guy named Sanballat and others. And what we see through the story there in Nehemiah and what you see there in the book, Pastor Mark points this out, anytime that someone has focused ambition for God, they're going to be facing 3 things. They're going to face mockery, they're going to face hatred, and they're going to face attacks. And Nehemiah experienced that. And you know what? If you're going to follow Jesus and be a man, you're going to face it too. But that's what men do. We take the hits, we take the arrows, we protect our families, we protect other people, because that's what Jesus did, and we want to be like Jesus. And that's what Nehemiah does. First, it starts with mockery. People are laughing at him. We can't rebuild that. People have wasted 100 years doing that. You can't do that in 52 days. And they did. In the process, the mockery turns to hatred, and they try to instill fear in people. And so they start like sabotaging things and burning things. And so Nehemiah, I love this, he institutes the Second Amendment. He tells the guys, you're going to build the wall. We're not going to stop. You're going to build the wall that's in front of your house, and each one of you is going to have a sword, and you're going to carry it with you when you're working. You're going to have a hammer in this hand. You're going to have a chisel in this hand. You're going to have a sword in this hand, or you're going to have it in your belt. He equipped people to defend themselves and to keep going. He didn't seek to control people. He sought to equip people. And then, don't fall there. And then, after the mockery, after the hatred, comes the attack, and we read that there's an assassination attempt on his life. Sanballat and these other guys changed their tune from like mocking him and trying to like burn things to, hey, Nehemiah, stop what you're doing and come down to this little hut over here. We're going to have dinner, and we're going to talk this out. We're going to compromise and figure this out. Nehemiah had the wisdom to know and the focus to know we are way past this point. You've been trying to kill me. You've been trying to hurt my family. You've been trying to hurt my nation. You've been insulting God. I'm not interested. And I love his response there in Nehemiah chapter 6. 4 times they come to him and say, hey, let's compromise. And because of his focused ambition to honor God and to honor his family and to honor his nation, this is his response. 4 times, I am doing a great work and cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? Basically, you're not worth my time. Your character, your conduct has disqualified you from being worth my time. I'm going to focus on doing what I need to do for God. There comes that point in all of our lives. Can't tell you when that is exactly, but Nehemiah found it. And 4 times, no. And in 52 days, he accomplished what they didn't accomplish in 100 years. That's what men do. They put themselves in uncomfortable situations and trust God and focus on what they need to do to accomplish what God calls them to do. Whether that's leading men in battle or standing up in front of people and giving a public speech for the first time. That takes courage. It's called being a man. Sometimes it's jumping in a cold pile of water and saying, I'm not good enough, but Jesus is. That's what a man does. Sometimes it's, just showing up and holding the door open for people with a smile on your face. Focused ambition. This is worth the sacrifice. This is worth my time. You are worth my time. I love our greeting team here at 412 Church. When I first came here, that was the first thing that struck me. The 3 or 4 layers of smiles you got to get through to get into the building. Like, it just blew me away. I'm like, man, this is awesome. I love our team. All of us have our own lives. We all have our own businesses. We all got things we got to do. But a man who's focused on being biblically successful and pleasing Jesus finds time to show up and serve and care for other people. Man, this is Phil at VBS last year. 400 some kids. Phil's got other things to do, and he shows up to be there for those 400 kids. That's what a man looks like. In chapter 2, we got this quotation here from Emperor Marcus Aurelius. He's one of the emperors of the Roman Empire after the time of Jesus. Not someone you want to take morals from, to be honest with you, but he is remembered as a wise man, and I certainly think this is a wise saying. He said here, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be, just be one. It is time to grow up and be men, have focused ambition, pursue Jesus, please Jesus. Now is the time to do it. Marcus Aurelius said that nearly 2,000 years ago. He was looking for a good man. And you know what? People today are still looking for good men. If you don't want to take my word for it, how about Joe Rogan and NFL quarterback Aaron Rodgers? They're looking for a good man to show up and help fix things.
As time rolls on, people are going to understand the need to have some sort of divine structure to things, some sort of belief in the sanctity of love and of truth. And a lot of that comes from religion. A lot of people's moral compass and the guidelines that they've used to follow to live a just and righteous life has come from religion. And unfortunately, a lot of very intelligent people, they dismiss all the positive aspects of religion because they think that the stories are mere superstitious fairy tales, that, you know, they have no place in this modern world, and, you know, we're inherently good and your ethics are based on your own moral compass and we all have one. And that's not necessarily true. We need Jesus. I think, for real. Like, if he came back now, it'd be great. Like, Jesus, if you're thinking about coming back
Right now?
now's a good time.
Yeah, pretty soon. Yeah.
Now's a good time.
Well, there's a lot of people that think that might be coming.
Well, it might be.
Mark of the beast. If there is the Christianity part and Jesus wants to come back and save everything,
It'd be good right around now.
yeah.
Like, don't wait till the election.
That's wisdom right there. Don't wait for the election. Jesus, come now. We need a good man. We need the good man right now to fix things. Men, I don't know if Jesus is going to come back before the election. If he doesn't, what he leaves this world with is us. We are called to be men like Jesus. In this world, if it doesn't get Jesus, it needs us to act like Jesus, to be real men. And that's what the man code is all about. How men who want to live for Jesus, this is how we live. All right? I'm going to pray for you, but we're going to have a small group time there around your tables. You got some questions there provided to you, as well as these are the questions from the end of the 2 chapters, also materials for discuss. We'll leave that up there for you. Let me pray for you guys. Lord, thank you so much for your goodness and your kindness and patience toward us, for the examples that you give us of men that pursued you well and lived pleasing lives. Not perfect lives, but men who sought to honor you, who had focused ambition, who assumed responsibility, who exhibited godly character, who honored their families, who respected authority, who showed consideration, who did not give up, who loved your word, your law, your people, and you blessed them for it. Father, make us men like that in this generation, a generation that can't even define what a man is physically, let alone in character. May they see what a man is as they look at us as we follow Jesus. Father, may that be true of us in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Pastor Thomas?